Hey guys, this is Puck15, and this time we're going to do a book review. And this time is going to be Stephen King's Night Shift. Now, this is actually a collection of 20 short stories, and this was copyrighted 1978, and it features great short stories, great 20 short stories. And I'm gonna review each and every one of them, and possibly a little bit of the take of their adaptations if they were in it. So, let's take a look at Jerusalem's Lot. Now, Jerusalem's Lot takes place after Salem's Lot. Now, it's just based on letters of to this one individual Bones, like Dear Bones, and he describes the story of going into a town. Now that just takes place in years after years of writing the letters, and they soon discovered that the town was infested by vampires. And then after that, it just moves on to Salem's Lot. So yeah, the adaptation is just a picture book. There's not a movie about the Jerusalem's Lot at all. It's a book story that I didn't really care much for, although it is a good read, and it's one of his long ones. It's one of the long ones in the 20 short story. And the next one is Graveyard Shift. Now, I've read in an interview that Graveyard Shift is actually his first novel. Is actually his first short story novel, or one of his first. Now, this one actually did had a adaptation to it, which I actually have the movie with other 4 stories, with other 4 movies in there. But mostly, the movie just explains more extra things in the movie, since this is just a short story. Basically, the short story was just going down to an underground cellar, to the place where they were working, and they found out that they have multiple giant bats, and that was the plot twist at the end. But in the movie, it only has like one. But in this book, it has multiple. So yeah, not much to tell about in detail about Graveyard Shift. But Night Shift is actually a story that is taking place after The Stand. His book Stand, which I didn't really read The Stand. Night Surf is something that I didn't really care for. Mainly because I didn't read The Stand, I didn't pretty much get 100% what it was trying to be about or trying to portray as. But it seems like Night Surf just takes place with a few teenagers just partying in some beach, and some characters got a virus of some sort, and it's a story that I didn't really care for, and I just felt like, nah. Now, the next one is I Am the Doorway. Now, I Am the Doorway actually has hand with eyeballs on it, and it makes the main character to scratch his hand constantly. And about the short story, it was when he murdered this one guy, this one teenage boy, and he is the doorway of where his body is at. And it's pretty much a creepy and surreal book, and it's also worth a read. And the other one is The Mangler. Now, this actually did have a movie adaptation, and it spawned like 3 sequels, and also it actually grabbed an influence on this movie. Well, there was actually a character there that was not from the book, that was not from the short story, and he was an inspiration to Dr. Vibes. And you know what Dr. Vibes was an influence today. It was an influence of the Saw. So yeah, that character that was in the movie adaptations was also an influence of Saw. And also the Mangler book and the adaptations also had an influence on the Saw series. Just thought I would throw that out. And the Mangler is actually a really gruesome story to read. It's about this one machinery that folds clothes, and instead it just becomes possessed and then it eats people. Kind of like an influence on the People Mover up in Disneyland, but the locals there call it the People Eater. So yes, the Mangler is a people eater. So sounds creepy enough. The Mangler is the story that is worth checking out. It's just worth reading. I mean, hell, it's gruesome and you need to check it out. The next short story is The Boogeyman. Now, the short story of itself had nothing to do with the movies itself. Now, the Boogeyman in this short story, the Stephen King's short story, is about this one father explaining his story of how the Boogeyman kills his kids, kills his remaining kids. And it's actually a really sad, depressing story until the end, where he was dismissed from therapy, and then when he turns back to the doctor, and it turns out, at the twist, that the doctor turns out to be the Boogeyman, and then he kills him. Yeah. Really sad story. One of his really sad and scary stories in this book, but mostly well worth the read. It's also a story I did enjoy reading. And the other one is Gray Matter. Now, Gray Matter is about this one drunken guy that drinks beer, and somehow there was some sort of a disease that got into his beer what he was drinking out of, and he is slowly becoming a gray monster that the book doesn't really explain what it looks like, but it looks like some sort of a gray, but they kind of close explaining it to like a gray blob, something like that. Now, the story just sticks on with this suspense on what the guy was turning into. And it's actually a really interesting story if you're a drinker and you're afraid that you might turn into a gray blob monster. But yeah, Gray Matter is just a good story to read while you're drinking beer. The other short story is Battleground. Now, Battleground is actually the very first influence on toys coming to life, like toy soldiers, or small soldiers, or hell, Toy Story, that influenced Disney. Now, Battleground is about these war toys, these mini war toys, just going to a war with a normal, average-sized person, like just trying to kill him and going out in war. Now, in the beginning of the book, he gets a package that claims the mini soldiers that about to come alighting and try to kill him. But at the end, he just eradicated them, and then just looks at the person trying to hunt down the person that sent in the package. And that was pretty much the whole entire story. But But yeah, if you're really into toys coming to life and trying to kill this one individual, yeah, it's also worth a story to read. Oh, there was a adaptation that was made into an episode of some TV show in TNT. I can't remember what the show was, but it was about like a 1 hour long episode, and there was no dialogue at all, and it was just the guy just trying to kill the toy soldiers, and it was filmed somewhere in the 2000s. So yeah, it is really worth an episode to check out. And plus, the episode is just named Battleground, and it pays tribute to his short story. And the other one is Trucks. Now, this actually has 2 adaptations. Now, you may be thinking that there is only one adaptation, but really there's 2. The first one that you were thinking about is Maximum Overdrive, that stars soundtracks of AC/DC. Now, actually, there's a second adaptation which has the same title, Trucks. And both of them just sticks to what the book had, to see what the short story has. The short story is just a group of people trapped in a gas station, and the truck's just circling around. And in the book, they explained how the humans get communication between the trucks, and the trucks, all they want is just gas. So that's what the book was trying to explain. So yeah, Trucks, a really good short story to read, and also the adaptations are absolutely awesome, especially Maximum Overdrive. An awesome adaptation. And the other one is Sometimes They Come Back. Now, Sometimes They Come Back was an adaptation that spawned to 3 movies. The story was explaining his high school bullies just always bullying him, now turned into adult, and still bullying him while in death. And it's a really good it's a really good short story, and it's also one of his long short stories that could barely fit into one of those magazines. And one of them is actually published in an essay college magazine, and that was the next one, Strawberry Spring. Strawberry Spring is a story that is one of those short stories I just don't really care for. It was basing around this Native American myth of one in every 4 years this Strawberry Spring event comes in, and it's really hard to explain, but it's a story that I didn't really care for, and I just blazed through. It's The next one is The Ledge. Now, this one was actually an adaptation to a compilation film called Cat's Eye, and that was the second segment of it. Now, the story was about our main character dating a wife of the owner of the ledge, and the owner of the ledge caught him and kidnaps the guy, and then kidnaps his girlfriend or wife, and then he forces him to lean on the ledge. And the ledge, the story of the ledge was really, really intense, and it just gets in, and it just makes me look to my eyes more closely to the book, like, be careful to not fall. It's mostly kind of thrill riding while reading it, and it just plays a movie into the mind. And the adaptation of the anthology film on Cat's Eye is actually a lot more cool. and a lot more kind of awesome. And they actually add a little bit more features on the ledge, but in the book it was just a simple straight ledge, just going through really slowly, trying to avoid the wind. And it's actually a really good story. One of those short stories in this book that I recommend. And the other one is The Lawnmower Man. Now, there's actually an adaptation. Well, I wouldn't really call it an adaptation. It was just an adaptation for the title only. The movie is completely different than the movie, so it's not worth mentioning. So it's not worth talking about the movie itself. The story itself is just this one guy that keeps great care of his lawn out of his own yard. He hires lawnmower people to mow his lawn, and then he fires this one guy, and then he hires the Lawnmower Man. What the Lawnmower Man does is that he grabs his lawnmower, strips down, starts his lawnmower, and then the lawnmower just moves by itself, and then naked Lawnmower Man just leans down and just eats his grass like a cow or a grazing animal. And the guy and the owner of the garden didn't like that. He felt really uncomfortable, and he thought that he wanted to kick this guy out or just call the cops or something like that. But at the end, the Lawnmower Man finds out what he's trying to do. He turns his lawnmower against the owner and kills him. Yeah, that's totally the story of its whole. And the next one is Quitters Inc. Now, people that are smokers would not really care about this, or they just wanted to avoid this story at its whole. But mostly, the story is just this one company that's trying to make people quit by kidnapping their wives and shell-shocking them, and eventually, if they take too much of the diet pills, they would cut off their wife's little finger. And that one actually had an adaptation from The Cat's Eye, and it was the very first compilation out of it. And it was actually a really good series. There were a few minor things that they had to change on the book, but mostly it just follows this main character that really wants to quit, and he went to Quitters Inc., and he just wants to follow on. He was a skeptic at first. He was starting to get a little bit scary, and then when he comes into the office, that's when it really starts. That's when the chilling's starting to get. And ever since that, it was a really chilling story. A well worth a book that is worth reading if you're a smoker or a non-smoker. It's still a good story to read. Oh, there was a second adaptation I almost forgot about, and it was filmed in India, and it's called No Smoking. And it was an adaptation to Quitters Inc. But unfortunately I didn't see it because I don't speak India. I do know a friend that do speak Indian, so I might let him check it out just to see how it is like. So that way he can get back to me on that. So yeah. Quitters Inc., one of those stories I do recommend checking out. And the other one is a really good one. I Know What You Need is actually a really, really good story. And it actually came kind of close of being like 50 Shades of Grey. Now, hear me out on this. I Know What You Need, this main female character just sitting down doing his studies, and there's this other character that comes in and say, I know what you need some ice cream. And throughout this whole entire story, it just focuses on the main character and the stranger, that they slowly built in a relationship together because the stranger know what the main character needs. like he can somehow read minds and some stuff like that. Coming close to the end of the story, you're starting to get a feel there's something wrong with this stranger. And then it just shows how horrible the stranger is. That he kills her fiance. He knows what she needs. And he will try anything to manipulate her mind to go with him. It's a really interesting story. And it's one of those stories I do recommend checking out. And the other one is mostly why I brought this book at the first place, is the next short story, Children of the Corn. Now, Children of the Corn is actually a really, really good short story. And it spawns so many adaptations. There's one adaptation which is just a short movie with a different title. I can't remember what the title is. It follows really close to the book, except for the ending, which I will get to the real story later. And the other adaptation is the 1980s. Is the 1980s Children of the Corn. And the other one is a remake. Was made in 2009. And the remake was terrible. So far I would stick with this one, because this one's a lot more better. And of course, since it came from a short story, they had to add some more features on it that is not even in the book, but there were some parts that were in the book. Like, for example, they crashed to a child while in the highway. That was in the movie, and that was also in the book. But let's get to the actual story, shall we? It starts with these two couple that do not get along, and their relationship is starting to fall apart. And then they crash the kid, they got the suitcase, they turned on the radio, they thought that they hear this little teenage boy just acting like a priest in the church in a radio broadcast talking about corn. And they got to the town, and the town was like deserted. And what they did instead is that he went to the church, he stumbled upon some birth dates and also death dates. And that's when he really discovered that there was something wrong in the town. And when he got back, the kids kidnapped the wife, and the husband just runs to the cornfield. And while he was running through the cornfield, he discovers the man who walks behind the rows, and he stumbles upon the kid during the corns as a camp. And there you see two people that are crucified. One was the Blue Man, that they called it, and it was just a former police guy from the town. And the other one was the wife, eyes gouged out, just pretty much dead. And then in the middle of the camp, they were announcing birthdays, and then they moved the age to 18 to 17. And that was pretty much it with the book. And Children of the Corn was actually a really great book, and it's kind of one of those long ones, but it's really well worth a read. Another one that takes place in Nebraska. The last one, Children of the Corn, was taking place in Nebraska, Gatlin, Nebraska, which was made up town. Takes place to another short story that also takes place in Nebraska, and it's called The Last Rung on the Ladder. Now, The Last Rung of the Ladder takes place in a Nebraska barn with these two little kids playing Geronimo with an unstable ladder and then diving into a hay bale. And they were playing Geronimo all day until eventually the last rung of the ladder broke. And it is up to the little boy to save the little girl by by just throwing the hay on the hay bale below her, and then the girl dropped for the last time, and then she somehow knows, yeah, save her. And then at the end of the book, the boy just turns into an adult, explaining the whole entire story, and then he reads an article of his sister committing suicide by falling on top of a building. A really sad story, to be honest with you. So, not really my favorite ones on the short story, but Now the next story is the one that is really, really short, like 7 short pages, and the 7th story was just this long. But mostly, it's just this one. It just takes place in a nice neighborhood, with this one guy just walking by, and then stumbles upon a guy selling flowers, and he explains, "Hey, I want to buy some flowers from a special woman." And the flower tender says, "Well, if it's for your mom, of course, then your mom would say, why are you throwing money and throwing it around, son? But if you're your girl, that's a different story." So yeah, it's just a story just taking place in conversation between the buyer and the guy that is selling flowers. So eventually the guy buys flowers for a girl, and the most memorable line is when the flower tender says, "Give the girl a kiss for me." And after that, the buyer just walks along his way with his flowers, and he stumbles upon this woman that he thought was named Norma, but she told her, "What are you talking about? I'm not Norma, and these flowers ain't for me." And the guy brings out a hammer and says, "It was always for you," and then kills the woman. Yeah. And then after that, the radio just explains that there is a hammer killer on the loose. And the buyer and the guy that's buying flowers, or the man that loves flowers, is the hammer killer. That is how short it is. That's basically what it all is. Just one guy buying flowers, and then just ending up giving it to a stranger from a wrong woman, and then ends up killing her with a hammer. It's that simple. And there was supposed to be an adaptation for it, but it's actually in development hell for like 10 years or so. And that's just pretty much it. And the other one, the one for the road, takes place after Jerusalem's Lot and Salem's Lot. Now it's about this family driving down, just getting lost, and then drove at to a wrong highway, and the father just stumbles upon this bar. Someone upon this bar, and he explains, "My family is in danger." And so he gets a ride to the car, back to his car, to where he left his family at, comes to find out that it was too late, that the family was already turned into vampires. And the vampires just wanted to kill the guys of the owners of the bar. It's really that simple. And it takes place in winter. The coldest day in the winter of that time. It's really that simple, and then it cuts to another short story that I pretty much don't really care for, but I really do think that that it actually has a special thing to Stephen King. And the last story is called The Woman in the Room. Now, The Woman in the Room is about this one guy taking care of his dying mother. That's pretty much it. And I'm pretty much sure that Stephen King wrote that story just for her mother, just for her dying mother. Just explaining how it's like to have a dying mother and just having it in story form. It's a story I didn't really care for. So yeah, there's a lot of great short stories. I do recommend checking it out. But actually, I recommend checking out this book and give some of these short stories in this book a good read. And not all of his short stories in this book are really fantastic or wonderful or anything, but it's most deserving a read. And after that, if you can find other adaptations for Night Shift, check them out. But anyway, I give the short story an 8 out of 10. Because there are some stories I didn't really care for, and there are some that I really enjoy. My next book review is actually gonna be one of my first stories. I get to break down what is the difference between the book and the movie, Misery. And after that, I'll be continuing watching the movie, and I'll give out my own thoughts about Misery. So, till next time, Book 15, out.